Welcome back to another video. In this one, we're gonna be chatting with Brad Hawthorne, and we're gonna be talking all things glide baits. Now, Northland actually has a new one. They've been coming out with a bunch of really good baits the last couple of years, and this is a new one, the Pitchin Puppet. But before we jump into this bait, Brad's gonna talk a little bit about when and where he likes to use these baits, when he likes to bust them out.
But season-wise, as far as getting through a season with glide baits, when I employ them, is when I'm searching for fish that early time of the year. So when the jig and shiner thing is going on, is also Pitchin Puppet time. And then as we get into summertime and those fish are transitioning out and we're snap jigging them, that's also when we're gonna use them. And then also right about this time of year right now, beginning of fall, Pitchin Puppet, glide baits, or when you drive over mark fish or you know, forward facing sonar, however you're doing it, however you're finding the fish and getting on top of them or pitching to them, right away in the fall is like probably the #1 time of year I use glide baits is fall time, because the fish mellow out a little bit more, you can get on top of them, or you can just sit, put trolling motor at 1 mile an hour and snap jig them going forward. Or you see them on forward facing sonar, you just pitch to them, give them a couple pops, and then they bite. And that's where you'll see the 3 sizes in this is, you know, the 1 ounce size, you throw that out there, that's going right to the bottom, and if the fish are aggressive, they're just gonna smack it. And then you got the 5/16 size, which I like for more of your finickier walleyes and crappie.
All right, now that you have a feel for when and where you should be using this style of bait, Brad's gonna give you a quick rundown on all the features of the new Pitchin Puppet. It's a really cool bait, lots of unique characteristics that make it, in my opinion, one of the coolest baits that's come out in a while.
All right, so the Pitchin Puppet, right? Great looking lure. Let's start with the optics on this. The best looking lure out there. It's completely encased in poly, and that gives this just a gorgeous look to it. You see that shine it's got? That's because the whole inside of this bait is protected by that outside case. And we're able to get those cool, like, catchy colors on the tail ends of them too. But what this does, this process allows this bait, it'll scratch on the outside, but you'll never affect the paint and the colors on the inside of this bait. That's why it's so cool. And if you guys know anything about these baits, glide baits, you are fishing them through the trashiest stuff out there. Rocks, weeds, sand, all that stuff that really beats up the lures can scratch these up all they want, because the second they get wet, all the scratches are just erased. They just disappear with that water. So, you know, that's #1, construction and, you know, color retention and all that's right here. #1 for me was, during R&D on this lure, was getting the hook right. You have to have an open water and you have to have an ice fishing version. Like your open water version, in my opinion, does not need a front hook, because you're pitching this, you're really aggressively fishing it, and you're just gonna get snagged up more. So in the wintertime version, absolutely have a hook on the front. Summertime version, don't need it in my opinion. Now moving on to the sizes. The 5/16 size is really good for finicky walleye and crappie. Then you move it to the 5/8 size, which is a good all-around size. It's good to get down with forward-facing sonar if you're pitching at fish. And then the 1 ounce size. The 1 ounce size is like a rocket ship. You throw that out there, it just goes shoo, boom, right down there, a couple pops, and the fish usually hit it. These come in 15 colors. So we have our bright zappy colors, then we got our natural colors with some cool tails on them, polka dot, whatever you got, Wonder Bread. I mean, the colors are seemingly endless, and the guys put a lot of thought into what colors actually work to catch fish and where. I mean, it wasn't just like, hey, we're just using standard colors. Our advice was, hey, if we're gonna do this, we've already got the best constructed bait out there. Let's throw the best colors on them too. It's just, what you'll see too, traditional glide baits fall really quick. These have a little bit more hang time. So let's say on traditional baits where you give them a good solid jig and the lure comes up 3 feet, it'll have 3 to 4 seconds of hang time with the Pitchin Puppet. So it gives it a little bit more hang time, which I like. When it gets up there, gets those fish looking up at it and then comes back down, that's what's attracting those fish in. So it's got a little bit more hang time. It's virtually indestructible. It's got the right hook on it. Now that hook, you guys have all lost fish on these baits, and the reason why is because they don't have enough hook gap. When the fish itself is fighting the hook gap, that's when you lose fish. That's where this gap right here holds the fish in there. If they get the whole thing in their mouth, now it's really hard. If a fish comes and engulfs this bait, if it eats it like that, to get that bait out of its mouth to lose a fish. So keep that in mind. Go ahead. A lot of times you'll see guys with soft hook sets on glide baits. Absolutely not. When I'm with my customers, anytime you feel anything, set the hook, because you don't know if it's a weed, a rock, or a fish. And honestly, I'd rather lose a lure than lose a 15-pound walleye. So I hope that helps you guys with the new Pitchin Puppet and using these baits with forward-facing sonar, traditional snap jigging, or just getting on top of the fish and traditionally vertical jigging them on glide baits.
Now, one thing that I love about these baits is you can fish them a lot of different ways. Traditionally, people think of just vertically jigging, and that's definitely a way to catch fish with them. But there's also pitching away from the boat. There's kind of like troll ripping or rip jigging. So I'm gonna let Brad kind of run through the different ways you can fish this bait and how he likes to think about it tactically.
Just like with crankbaits, you gotta figure out size and color, and then you have to figure out your technique. Just like with crankbaits, sometimes you're casting them and straight reeling them, sometimes you're trolling them, sometimes you're jerk bait fishing them. So just like with glide baits, you gotta figure out, am I snap jigging, going a mile and a quarter an hour and forward, and just snap jigging the bait? Am I getting on top of them? How I do it is, when I'm usually snap jigging baits, it's because the fish are a little spooky. You can't sit on top of them. You can't vertically fish on top of them. So snap jigging, you're running through fish, picking off the active ones, and you circle back and just keep rinsing, repeating that. The other one is pitching, to where the fish are on an edge, or they don't want you on top of them. You're marking fish with Mega Live and you're throwing at the fish, throwing either behind them, in front of them, or directly on top of them, whichever works best, because it's always different, and then working the lure back and they just drill it. So that's the technique with forward-facing sonar. There's 3 or 4 main techniques. You got forward-facing sonar, pitching to them, then you have snap jigging, and then you have vertical fishing. So you have to figure out why, what, when, and where when they're on these bites. But traditionally, I start with a vertical approach and I move from there, because I always want to process fish as fast as I can. So if I can just drive out on the lake, find the fish, sit on top of them, put Mega Live down and just start extracting fish out right on top of them, I'm gonna do that all day long. If fish are a little spooky and I gotta get away from them, I'm gonna beam them, find the fish, pitch at them, and catch them. Or if they're super shy and you're just having to cover water, that's when that snap jigging comes into play. So I hope that helps you guys with your glide baits coming up this fall or next spring for catching some walleye.
One thing that I do really like about these Pitchin Puppets is undoubtedly they have the best colors you're gonna find anywhere. And Brad is gonna share a few of his favorites for the types of bodies of water that he likes to fish.
So the colors of the Pitchin Puppet are absolutely awesome. What I like about them is you're not gonna deteriorate the bait as you use it, because it's encased in that poly, so you're not chipping paint, things of that matter. And like here, anyone that knows Mille Lacs, like this green is super juicy early color. A couple years ago we had green tied on like every day out here. So, and another one, like all you guys that fish Red Lake, look at that glow red. That right there. We were out on Center Bar and in front of Rogers like 2-3 weeks ago, and we were pitching these guys out there in like 6-8 feet of water, just cracking fish. So the 5/16 size in this red, super good Red Lake color. This right here, Mille Lacs North End break, absolutely perfect. Then you take it later on in the year on Mille Lacs and Leech, we were just whacking fish on this perch color, because we had some pretty good perch blooms this year. That right there is just identical perch. And then this guy here, anyone that fishes clear bodies of water knows that if you ain't in a little purple in your color scheme and you're walleye fishing in summertime, you need to, because this puts walleyes in the live well. Period. If you got a lunch date and you need to make a sandwich, right here, that's my favorite color. And then you go into there where if it's a little bit overcast, bang, boom, put a little bit of blue, a little bit of chartreuse, a little bit of orange, right there. It's like ringing the dinner bell.
Now, every good walleye angler has a number of different tactics that they would consider to be mainstays in their arsenal, whether that's a jig, a bobber, a crankbait. But right now, Brad is going to talk about why this category of bait is extremely important in any walleye angler's arsenal and what makes it unique and the reasons why you need to have them in your tackle box.
Guys go, why glide baits? Why are they around? You know, historically they were wintertime bait forever and ever and ever. And the last 25 years we've seen, you know, snap jigging came in, made them a little bit more popular. Guides we've always used. I mean, my whole career we've been using some form of glide bait, you know, here and there. And the reason why is you're able to get a more aggressive approach with a jig. I mean, if you come down to it, basically they're jigging lures, and the way you're employing them is what's catching the fish. Being able to erratically jig this and match the color patterns of what's actually swimming down there is huge. So that's one. The other one is bopping this guy forward, and the fish see it and they just react to it because they see that bopping through, and they're like, there's no disconnect in their mind. They're like, hey, that's a perch feeding on the bottom, and they just go and crack it. And now you get down to color selection. Well, if you're on Mille Lacs, you're using something natural. If you're on Upper Red Lake, you're using something like that. So it's all metric, right? I mean, you just have to put the right color in the right body of water, and you're gonna start catching fish with glide baits. That is why they're popular, because they work from fishing opener all the way up until freeze out, and in some cases we catch a lot of fish in the winter on the glide baits, just fishing them vertically. So
that's about all we got for you in this video. Special thanks to Brad for sharing a bunch of good information. Make sure to check out the Pitchin Puppet. To me, this is one of the coolest baits that's come out in a while. There's a lot of key features that make it unique, and in a lot of ways better than what's out there right now. So if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below, because we have a lot more awesome content coming in the future. And until then, we will see you in the next one.